Welcome to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly, where we uncover everything you should know about Vegas philanthropy. Let's head to the studio now and see what we've unpacked in this episode. Hello, Charlotte. How are you?
Ollie, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. I want to circle back on last week's episode where we were talking about mission shifting. I got a few things that have come up since last week's episode that I want to, talk to you about and get your take and input on as a couple of these local nonprofits.
Wonderful. Do share your findings.
I will. So, I want to talk about a particular organization here in Las Vegas that advertises themselves as being an organization that is supposed to mobilize the community into volunteer engagement, but then has now shifted their mission over the years to being a food provider in what she's calling a food desert, and then setting up these mobile markets and food on the go and a senior meal program. But then I went back to the original mission, and I'm so confused because I don't want to get this wrong. So I want to read the actual mission. So originally, when she started, the mission was to build a stronger community by keeping the community connected, by inspiring people to get involved, give back, and make a difference in the community. And now the mission, according to her impact report, says the mission statement is to increase access to food, resources, and supportive services to build a stronger, healthier, and more connected community. What's your take on that?
Well, I really need them to make up their mind. The one thing I do want to go back on is when you mentioned food desert. This term is loosely used in our city, and I can't stand it. Food desert really implies having absolutely no access, or it's an extreme barrier for people to get to the resource of purchasing food, or getting to a food bank, whatever the case may be. With that being said, there are literally several grocery stores that are up and down these main streets, bus lines that pass a 7-Eleven, an AM/PM, a Shells where they have turned into small grocery items. You can get apples there, right? Buy a hot dog, get some chips, you can buy a loaf of bread, get your juice and milk. So I don't understand why they like to use that word food desert. On the other hand, not aligning the mission for what's on the website versus your impact report, where are you? Because it sounds like you're all over the place.
I'm just going to keep expanding on this topic with you because food desert, I feel the exact same way you do. We live in Las Vegas. Yes, the town has grown. Yes, we've expanded. However, we're not in a remote location where people have to drive an hour and a half each way to get groceries, realistically. So the word food desert, it works in other states. It doesn't work here in Nevada. We're not in a remote location where you could barely get cell phone service. And seriously, with Amazon delivery and Uber Eats these days, it's impossible for people not to be able to get food. If you truly needed food, there are resources and ways to get food. You do not need an organization out there claiming that they are going to deliver food or set up pop-up markets. These senior programs have been around a long time. There's a well-known faith-based one that does a senior meals program here every single day.
Been here in the city our entire lives, and like you said, I feel like this organization, because I think I know who you're talking about. They've expanded so much that they're stepping on the toes of other organizations who have built credibility, who have the actual data, who have done the footwork into their realm, right? If it's like Meals on Wheels, that's case in point. That has been established here for so long, and it sounds like this organization is like, we have perfected it. We're doing this. But are you really?
So it's funny you say that because it just reminds me of that old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. I feel like that's where we're at. I feel like this organization wants to be in the spotlight for doing good, mobilizing many volunteers and providing all these resources to the community. But what is your niche? You started off as a volunteer-based focus. Now you've shifted into things like rental assistance and food and workforce readiness. Which one are you doing? And I guess my question to them would be, when somebody comes to you and offers you money, grant or otherwise, and they say, listen, we want to make this funding for X, and you don't have program X. Are you going out there and creating a program to spend that funding? Because to me, that's not even the logical and the responsible thing to do because there's no sustainability there. What happens to those families that you've started to help that you no longer will receive funding for if it was a one time fund? And that's not a program you have staff for or even expertise.
And that's the bigger piece. It's the expertise behind these programs that sounds like they're launching just because the money is available. And then this goes into a broader view of the collaboration piece. You have your niche, but if there's funding available for a niche that's not yours, but you're able to help another nonprofit, then how about collaborate on that and give that money to the nonprofit that has built the credibility and the expertise behind that? And you guys work together. But nobody wants to do that anymore. Everybody is greedy and they're expanding. And here's the thing, our community needs it. But I feel like there's just been so much change with all of these new programs, new nonprofits, that there's no footing onto what the core needs are here in our city. Because now somebody wants to just not work for somebody else. They want to pretend that they're doing good, and then now they're getting paid $250,000 to run a nonprofit.
Right. That part too. I did do some research on this organization because it's been coming up across my news feed for several months now. And what stemmed this topic today and me wanting to discuss this with you was a Facebook post I just saw. So I remember a few months back, I saw a news story about how they were launching this groceries on the go or mobile market, where they transformed a school bus into this god awful pink. I mean, it's hideous. But there's this pink bus that you can shop on. She has transformed it into a makeshift grocery store. Very minimal. I mean, how many people can you put on a bus at one time with all this stuff, right? So 2 or 3 people at a time at best. I saw this big grand opening and ribbon cutting for this bus program, right? I was like, wow, this is kind of different. All of a sudden, this past week on social media, she's calling it the relaunch. I never even knew it left.
So did she not service as many people as she thought and needed to pivot? Or does she not have the staff to maintain the program?
Not really certain what happened because obviously she doesn't post her failures online. You know, the impact report is padded so heavily with things like even as far down as tracking the carbon dioxide in poundage that she saved. And yes, that's what I said. The carbon dioxide in poundage. So I'm assuming she's got a scientist or a biologist or something.
I'm sorry. Who? An environmental scientist of that profession to provide that information? Because that's needed. Why?
I don't know why anybody would care.
Is there anything else natural that they're tracking as opposed to, who's hungry?
No, but you talk about what are they tracking, and everything is in pounds. So even the food they give away. What's weird is I watch some of their videos on social media where they're doing these mobile pop-up events or these drive-through food, I don't know what they call them technically, but her drive-through food market, right? I don't see anything being weighed on a scale. They're putting it in the trunk of people's cars. So how do you know how many pounds of food each person got? And then in watching the videos, there are price tags on some of this stuff where she says she accepts EBT, SNAP benefits, credit card, cash. You're selling the food to these people. I thought the whole mission was to provide access to food. We can all go buy our own groceries.
Right. People on the SNAP program use their EBT to go to the actual grocery stores and buy their food. So what difference does that set them apart? Like they want to save their money, right? Is that not what I'm understanding?
Well, and it depends on where she's at that particular week. So somebody that gets EBT and could go to the grocery store that's a mile down the road, why wouldn't they go to the grocery store instead of going 7 miles out of the way to go meet her at her bus or her pop-up and buy groceries that are not even the same price as the grocery store? Girl, I saw a screenshot of one of these, and the price tag in the photo was crazy to me. Like a jar of mustard or mayonnaise, it was like $3. But here you are saying you're providing access. You're charging more than the grocery store. People can go into the local grocery store, use a coupon, get it for $1. There's a case lot sale periodically. I mean, what is happening? Are you in a business or are you actually trying to do good and give it away? My understanding is she gets it for free too.
Right.
She's in partnership with resort properties that give her, through this Food Alliance program, all the leftover food. So it should just be a vehicle of transferring it from the casino to the client.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that does not make sense on why you would charge. So that's the other question. How does that get reported to the donors, right? If you have donors that are giving you dollars for your programs, but then you're turning not even just dollars, you're in kind, but then you're turning around and charging for what you got free. So again, can you even be considered a non-profit at this point?
I mean, I think this one needs a little bit more looking into closely because I feel like she may have had good intentions when she started, right? It was to get the community together, volunteer, let's mobilize people. It just takes one person to do good and then it kind of catches on. I get that model. And that was great. But now here we are and we're into the food business and the rental business. Now we're getting people workforce readiness. What criteria do you or your staff have that qualifies you to be a case manager? Technically, a social worker? What are you doing? Are you just handing out a piece of paper to send them to another nonprofit? You're not helping. That's hindering. We can all do that. We all have Google. We don't need to go to another place to be told to go somewhere else. It defeats the purpose. And here's the other interesting part about this. Everything is by appointment, and the times that they're open are legitimately the times that people would be working. It's like 8:30 to 2 p.m. So if you're a person who's employed, you would have to make a choice.
Of making money or missing out on your hours and money just to go get free food. If it's the free food for that day, it may be the market where they have to pay, which I'm still confused on because it sounds like they have programs that provide free food, and then there's another program that charges for food. So, how do you distinguish which demographic is going? That you're serving for that day? Like, again, it's the confusion.
It's so confusing. And when you pull up the website's even more confusing. I think she just throws anything out there to see what sticks and grabs someone's attention because she thinks the bigger the number in the impact report equals success. But in reality, it's not. And anybody that knows how to read a 990 or an impact report for an organization would understand you don't need 80 pages of numbers in millions of poundage. Nobody cares about how many pounds. How many people did you actually serve? And can you say with 100% certainty you served those people just by getting the food from some other place and putting it in the trunk of their car?
Right. You can receive £1 million of food, but that does not mean you distributed the full £1 million in that time frame.
Bingo. And not only that, the more I look at this, the more I think to myself, the people that want to support a mission like this, fantastic. But if you don't truly know what they're doing and they're not good at everything they do, why do you continue to support them? If they're getting the quantity of food they're claiming based off their impact report, there should be no such thing as a food desert. There should be no such thing as anyone having issues with hunger. And here's what's mind boggling, this is once a month. Once a month. This is not even a trip to the grocery store.
So there's no way. Yeah, no, those numbers are definitely questionable.
And I think that's why the numbers look inflated. It's because this is based on a monthly. So it's pad, pad, pad. But reality is, people don't go to the grocery store once a month, right? You go to the grocery store probably once a week on your days off. You do your meal planning. But then, say you're a person who goes to this pop up or grocery on the go bus and you get your food. But there's a lemon and a lime and an apple. There's no more chicken because it's while supplies last. So now what do? Now you got to make a trip to the grocery store anyway to go get your protein. Crazy to me to think that this is actually helping. I feel like it's creating more barriers to food. They're sending them on this rabbit hole circus to go get some chicken.
Yeah, no, I can beg on the side of the road and get $5 and buy a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, which would be a lot faster. Which is unfortunate because programs like these are definitely needed in our community. But again, it goes back to what really is your mission? And just by the beginning of us talking about this, their mission is different. Right, from their impact report versus what's on their website. What is really going on? And are you just out there as the CEO, executive director, just trying to take the money to sustain a certain lifestyle? Because I like to dig deeper into that as well. Or are you truly here for the good of the people of our city?
Well, I think that's another piece too, just the high amount of money that the CEO at this particular nonprofit is making. Because the turnover for her entry staff, I mean, I just did a quick pull up on her website. Positions available, 9. 9 positions are available, and it seems like these are the same positions that keep rotating. It's not like we're growing, we are losing people and having to replace them for whatever reason. I don't know, I didn't do too much digging into the human resources side, but I would venture to guess that based on some of the comments on social media and the Google reviews from clients, there are very long lines to get food. When they get to the front, they're out of everything, or they spent 3 hours in line and got a bag of avocado, right? So there's a lot that needs to be uncovered about this organization. I feel like it could have been great had she just stayed where she started, mobilizing people to get involved in the community, raising awareness on what our needs are, that's one thing. But to try and reinvent the wheel and do all of it solely under one umbrella of your company is never going to work.
Doesn't help any organization. When you overextend yourself into other areas, you not only lose your mission, but your credibility starts to deteriorate because you don't have all the answers.
And that's where I'm at with this particular organization. I used to think it was cool to have an organization that was literally mobilizing people to get more volunteerism and engagement in our local Vegas community. It would help raise awareness for other nonprofits, expand partnerships. But now it's like she wanted to become the monopoly on everything. And I'm thinking there are 50 other nonprofits that have been here doing their one specific program that they have mastered and have become the staple for. And then you've got somebody who maybe got some money and decided, I'll make a program to get that money. But then the money ran out and now the program's gone. I think that's what may have happened with this bus temporarily,
Mm.
or the school program, because she did have a grocery store in some local schools here. They did a big ribbon cutting at one. And then weeks later, there was no grocery store in that school anymore. So, really weird to see. It's in the headlines making this big splash with a check presentation and ribbon cutting and politicians. But then in reality, there's really no program behind that. It never even took off the ground.
And do you think that's also part of the fact that there are two other organizations that are heavily embedded within the schools, and she was trying to either compete or get part of that demographic? Because I know there are two other organizations that have a very strong relationship with the Clark County School District. And so I know a lot of nonprofits try to get in with the school district, but there's such a dog and pony show you got to do. But again, it comes with the credibility. Did she really think it was going to be easy, competing with these other two organizations that are truly embedded in the schools at all levels?
I think from what I'm reading and understanding, her largest partner in terms of her food program is one that we've spoken about, I think, a few episodes back. The largest food pantry or food bank. I'm not sure which one they called themselves because they should be a bank, not a pantry, but I'll use the word interchangeably. But she partners with them. So I feel like they might have thought they had the monopoly on the food market if they wanted to tackle it. Because here you have the largest food bank giving the food to now an organization who's like, I'm mobilizing millions of pounds of food. But listen, this is one of those situations where somebody will wise up and understand that throwing numbers in an impact report does not mean success or that you've done anything to move the needle.
Boy, agreed. And I hope donors and philanthropists really start to take note, to really dig deep and ask the hard questions and not just be sold on the facade. Get into the weeds of the organization because that's important. You know, you talk about the food bank or pantry. However, there are other organizations doing just fine without the food bank. They're making moves, providing the need, because they've got the support of the community, which speaks volumes. So when you're hyper dependent on these so called big names, trying to force yourselves into a space, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a success because they're giving you all of these tools and this access. How are you distributing that? Really looking at who's in the social media realm being most recognized when you've got organizations that aren't on social media but are really doing the boots on the ground work.
Yeah, and I guess food for thought, no pun intended. I think the donors supporting this program because when you look at some of them, they're very large companies here in town. I get corporate social responsibility. I understand it's part of their business culture and they want to do it. But I feel like if they just spent time looking deeper at what they're wanting to support, we wouldn't have to question some of these organizations because it's very clear. If you and I can look at this stuff and read it and understand that this doesn't make sense, we have questions. We want an explanation. Why wouldn't they? I wouldn't write a check to anybody until I felt warm, fuzzy, and in love with you, that you were doing the right thing and that my money is going to make the biggest bang for my buck. And I am not seeing that from here.
And I think, you know what, you bring up a good point, which I'm sure we can cover on our next episode, is how we read into an organization's 990s, what their revenues are, what their expenses are, who they're paying to outsource certain activities, whether it's grant writing, whether it's event planning, because all of those are legitimate. But then how legitimate are these companies that they're paying out to? And so maybe that's something we can cover for our donors and philanthropists on the next show.
I just wrote it down as a reminder. Put that on the calendar for next week's episode. Let's do an overview and just share the basics of what to look for on a 990 for an organization and what the actual impact is. You know, the part about the impact report is you don't have to have one. But when you receive grant money, it's great to show what the level of impact was for the monies you received. The problem is, an impact report doesn't show exactly where your data is coming from. There's no footnote on this impact report that says, we received 50 million pounds of food from the local food bank, and we distributed 20 million pounds through this program, through this program, and through this program. It just says, we did 50 million pounds of food. Well, pounds of what? Potatoes are heavy. Did you just give away potatoes? Right?
Right.
We're about out of time for today.
Dolly, it's interesting. As we continue to deep dive into these organizations, and again, not to discredit what their initial intentions are, but to really open up the eyes of people to hold them accountable for what they're doing or what they're not doing, and to open the eyes of the donors and philanthropists who are wanting to invest in the community. So I look forward to our show next week.
Same. Have a wonderful week. Talk soon.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly. If you want to reach out to us with suggestions for a topic on a future episode, drop us an email at pearlsonapigpodcast@gmail.com.